Hi there. In this video, we're going to look at the difference between a basic bird in flight photo and the best kind of bird in flight photos. And I'm going to do a little experiment. So I'm going to spend an hour photographing birds in flight to what I think is a basically good standard, and then an hour photographing things that I think are a little bit better, and describe the difference between the two. And it might surprise you because I don't think there is a lot of difference. It's just the way that you approach things. So we'll get into that after I've done the experiment. So I'm a little bit further along the coast from where you saw me in a recent video on stabilisation. And the reason I've come a little bit further along the coast is this is probably the best place for gannets. There are absolutely loads of them. There aren't many other birds. So I can get a good comparison between the two experiments. Same bird, same photographer, same gear, and I'm even going to largely use the same settings. I'm just going to adjust the ISO to make sure that the exposure's right between shots. But other than that, the only variable is the choices that I make. So what makes a basic but good bird in flight shot? Well, firstly, it has to be sharp and in focus. So you want to get the focus point over the bird's head, ideally over its eye, and you have to choose a shutter speed that's sufficiently fast to freeze the action. Has to be well exposed, so you don't want highlights that are blown out or shadows that are crushed. You also want to make sure that you've got all of the bird inside the frame. So you don't want any tips of the wings just outside the frame, get the bird in it. It has to be composed well, and that normally means that you want to leave some negative space for movement in the direction that the bird's flying, so some space in front of the bird. You also want to make sure the bird's eye is in the photo. It's no good if the bird is facing away from you. You need that connection with the bird, with their eye in the picture. And you want to be thinking about wing position. So if the bird has got wings flapping up or down, that's great because you can see some wing detail. If the bird has got wings straight out, but it's tilted in one direction or another, that's also good because you can see detail of the wings. The problem with wing position comes when the bird has got both wings straight out like this and you can't see any detail along the length of the wing because it's stretched out. So some basic things to think about to get a good bird in flight photo. Let's move on and take some. Right then, so 1 hour on the phone set. Let's start. Right, that's basically time up. So I've had an hour taking basic photos, and wow, was that a long hour. I have no idea how many I've taken, but there must have been a lot because I had to change my memory card partway through. Have to say, it's a little bit boring taking the same kind of photos over and over again. But the interesting thing will be when we come to compare with taking some more interesting photos. So I'm going to just have a break and then I'm going to set another alarm and we'll do an hour taking some interesting photos. Whilst I'm having that break, let's have a look at those basically good bird in flight shots. Okay, so what's going to make the difference for a better bird in flight shot? Well, really, I think there are two things. One, it can either be more artistic, or two, the bird can be doing something slightly more interesting. So let's think about the artistic. Well, down here, I've got a grassy bank that I'm sat at the top of that leads down some cliffs. If I photograph the birds flying really close to the edge of those cliffs or just beyond them, then I should be able to blur out that grass and make a nice foreground. So just give a little bit more interest than having a bird shot against the sea or the sky. Also, over there in the background, in fact, it might be easier if I move this side for you to see, we've got some cliffs. And if I focus my attention on photographing the birds flying around those cliffs, I might get some interesting scenery in the background to tell a bit more of a story about it. So those are a couple of examples of how it might be a bit more artistic. You could also do some other things like taking long shutter speed shots and getting some motion blur. I'm not going to worry about that today. I'm just going to focus on the composition of it. Now, another thing would be if the bird is doing something more interesting, and typically that means we want to see some kind of behaviour. So things that might be happening here are birds carrying nesting material. So it's the time of year when gannets are building their nests. They could be carrying grasses to go off and build those nests with. The birds could be coming into land on some of the grass or the cliffs. The birds could be interacting together. Now that would be great. Get two birds that interact, and it does happen sometimes when two birds come into land in a similar position, or one comes into land and there's already a bird where it's about to land, things like that. Sometimes you even see them interacting in the sky, but to do that you have to look out for them. In fact, for all these things, whether it's an artistic type shot or a behaviour type shot, you have to look for them. And so I'm not going to take any single shot that is just of a simple bird in flight, because for every moment I'm taking one of those kind of shots, I'm potentially missing a better shot. So I'm going to set a timer for another hour now and focus on trying to get those better kind of shots. Right, that's another hour done, and I have to say that hour went a lot faster than the first one. But I'm convinced I took far less photos than I did in the first hour. So let's take a look at those photos now, and then we can compare. So, what's the difference between the first hour and the second hour, the basic versus the better stuff? And I'm hoping you'll all agree that the second hour's photos were better, but clearly there were a lot less of them. And I think also for me personally, the second hour was far more enjoyable than the first hour. In the second hour, I was using my brain more, and that is the key difference here. I was using my mind to think about what could create a nice shot rather than just what is a technically decent shot. And so that does take a little bit more thinking, but it also makes things more interesting. More interesting for you, but also more interesting for your viewers. And at the end of the day, do you want to walk away with a whole memory card full of the same types of photos, or do you want the opportunity to do something creative that gives you the chance to make different photos than you have created before, different photos than your friends and other people who've been at the same location on the same day as you, a chance to do something a little bit different. And honestly, I think this is one of the biggest mistakes that photographers make who want to move on from that starting out category to the better category. They carry on taking the same thing over and over again. Now, in certain circumstances, there is some use to that. If it's the first time you've seen a subject, if it's the first time you've been at a location, even if you're new, you may just want to try and take some basically technically decent shots. But after a while, you're going to want to move on. And that's where you need to consciously be thinking, right, now's the time. I've got enough basic shots. Let me try and create something more artistic. Let me try and create something that tells a bit more of a story about that subject and its environment. Let me try and capture some behavioural shots if I can. And that is the beauty of something like this. So go out there, get some basic shots for yourself, and then move on from it. Move on and try and create something a little bit more interesting. And you'll find you have a lot less editing to do at the end of the day, a lot less running through lots and lots of photos that are pretty much all basically the same and having to decide which one is best. Now, I hope you find this video interesting, and if you want to take another walk on the wild side, you might like to check out this video. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.